Good evening, everyone. For Telesur English, I'm Sarah Begum in Caracas, Venezuela. Latin American leaders have begun a two-day Latin American and Caribbean summit in Costa Rica. CELAC is a coalition of the 33 Latin American and Caribbean nations, representing around 600 million people. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and Bolivian President Evo Morales both issued statements leading up to their official trips to the Central American country. Maduro said he will bring the truth of the Bolivarian revolution. Venezuela's president went on to discuss the legacy and influence of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez in the creation of the Regional Integration Group. At the summit, the president of Cuba, Raúl Castro, said that the re-establishment of relations between the United States and Cuba is a victory for all of the Americas.
These changes are the result of almost a century and a half heroic struggle and fidelity to the principle of the Cuban people. They were also possible due to the new epoch in our region and the solid and brave claim of the peoples of the CELAC. They have been a reivindication for our America that acted as a unit for this purpose.
Raúl Castro and the nations present at the CELAC conference also called for the ending of the United States blockade against Cuba.
Establishment of the diplomatic relation is the start of a process toward the normalization of bilateral relations, but they are not possible while the blockade exists. Also until the territory illegally occupied by the Guantánamo naval base is returned.
The Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa reiterated his condemnation of the economic, financial and commercial blockade by the United States against Cuba.
La integración debe dar frutos concretos.
The integration should give specific and concrete goals, and for this I insist that we need quantifiable goals and work efficiently, and we also need mutual solidarity to speak clearly without fears. Enough with the criminal blockade against Cuba. It threatens Cuba and goes against the Charter of the Organization of American States. It threatens the fundamental document of the United Nations. It goes against international rights and against all the principles that their speeches defend.
Contra el derecho internacional y contra todos los principios.
Now, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news in Latin America. Paraguayan dock workers have taken to the streets to demand the freeing of 11 of their colleagues jailed last year during a peaceful protest. The dockers are demanding the government reverse its decision to privatize the river ports in this landlocked country.
We believe the government's policies of privatizing the main ports in Asunción is against the interests, not only of the dock workers, but of the whole Paraguayan nation.
Sino que contra los intereses de la propia nación paraguaya.
After years of campaigning by the gay rights movement, Chile's Congress has approved a law to allow civil unions. The legislation gives same-sex couples equal rights on inheritance and pensions, but activists are still pushing for same-sex marriages. Thousands have marched in the major cities of Honduras to demand the resignation of President Juan Orlando Hernández on the first anniversary of his government. The protests were led by former President Manuel Zelaya, who criticized the Hernández's government's massive layoffs of public employees.
Juan Orlando Hernández and the National Party failed when a presidential advisor confessed to trying to bribe people's representatives by offering them money from the organized crime, in exchange for the approval of constitutional powers to give direct orders to the 6,000 members of the military police, which he has announced he will increase to 10,000.
The relatives of 43 missing Mexican students have refused to accept the government's decision to close the investigation. The families are rejecting claims by the Attorney General, who said there was what he called legal certainty that the students had all been murdered by a drug gang. Their disappearance in Ayotzinapa last September sparked nationwide protests and a crisis for the government of President Enrique Peña Nieto.
We reject the fact that today the prosecutor wishes to close the Ayotzinapa affair in this way, by trying to make people believe and insisting on his theory, by which the 43 student teachers were killed and incinerated at the Cocula landfill site.
Tens of thousands of Cubans marched in Havana to celebrate the 162nd anniversary of the birth of the founder of Cuban independence, José Martí. Through his writings and political activity, Martí became a symbol for Cuba's struggle for independence from Spain in the 19th century. He is often referred to as the apostle of Cuban independence. In Peru, in spite of the recent labor rights victory, protests are continuing. Our correspondent in Lima has the story.
Walter Ramos is a machine operator in Peru for a bottling company which is a subsidiary of the multinational Coca-Cola company. He joined his co-workers in the 6th march of a series of large labor rights demonstrations that recently took place in the country. This time, the march was led by labor union workers from the textile sector and other industries such as soft drink producers.
In the practice, what the government is doing is benefiting the business sector. They are increasing their earnings and they are making it easier for them to fire workers. For that reason, we are here together against this law that allows collective redundancies.
Ramos was referring to a recent law that allows companies to fire up to 5% of workers if their profits are down. Union leaders fear the measure will be just another pretext to dismiss employees trying to form or join labor unions. The march was also backed by the youth organizations that led the previous 5 massive rallies.
We as young people are showing solidarity with all workers. When we say that the struggle continues, it is because the law has only been a mere sample for the awareness of the youth.
The law, explained his proposal, is basically a universal law to protect the rights of all workers. His initiative will also block special measures that attempt to waive employees' rights in certain industries. Reporting for Telesur from Lima, Peru, Rael Mora.
Thanks to Rael. Moving to world news, the new Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has started his term by revoking unpopular neoliberal measures of the preceding government. At its first cabinet meeting, the new government halted the privatization program demanded by the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. These included plans to sell off the main public power company and the country's largest docks. But the left-wing Syria government also says it is ready to negotiate over Greece's debt.
There will be no shadows between our government and the EU. There will be no threats. It's not about who climbs down first. The crisis from 2010 has only victims and losers. The only ones who gain are bigots and racists, those who invest in fears and decisions.
The US state of Georgia has executed a man who his lawyers say were intellectually disabled. The Supreme Court turned down a last-minute appeal to spare the life of 54-year-old Warren Hill. He was pronounced dead after receiving a lethal injection. Protesters outside the prison called the execution an abomination. Syrian government officials had joined peace talks with sections of the Syrian opposition in Moscow. Our correspondent in Damascus, Nashwan Abdullah, has more.
The Syrian government official and opposition representatives began consultations this Wednesday in Moscow in order to find an agreement aimed to end the 3-year Syrian crisis, which according to the United Nations have left more than 200,000 dead and about 9 million displaced. the governmental delegation announced that 3 important points were debated through the meetings, such as the need of fighting terrorists and the urgent need to stop aiding terrorist organizations from countries like USA, Turkey, and Arab nations. The third important point was the importance of held the talks in the Syrian capital of Damascus with no external intervention. The opposition representatives revealed a draft of mutual understanding regarding a political solution and demand the release of political prisoners. After the meeting, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia will provide Syria with all help till the end of the crisis. Nashwan Abdullah, Telesur, Damascus, Syria.
Rubble-strewn streets and gutted buildings show the damage left by the ferocious battle for the Syrian border town of Kobani. After months of fighting, Kurdish forces drove the Islamic State group out of town on Monday in a symbolic blow to the jihadists who have seized swatches of territory across Syria and Iraq.
You say Kurdish people are strong? We don't get afraid of anybody. This is our land. Those are our houses, and they came from outside to fight with us, and the whole world doesn't accept this.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Lebanon's Hezbollah it will pay the full price after missiles killed 2 Israeli soldiers. The exchange of fire on the Lebanese border has raised fears of another all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. A Spanish UN peacekeeper was also killed in the clashes. This was the most serious confrontation between the two sides in recent years. In sport news, the former World Footballer of the Year and Barcelona and Real Madrid player Luis Figo has become the latest candidate to throw his hat into an increasingly crowded ring in the battle to unseat Sepp Blatter as FIFA president. As the Dutch FA president Michael van Praag outlined his credentials in Amsterdam, Figo unveiled his candidature and said he had the requisite 5 nominations from among FIFA's 209 members. Once the undisputed kings of cricket, 2-time champions West Indies head for the World Cup plagued by infighting, political intrigue and poor form. Where once the West Indies made history, now they are a footnote. Their defeat to South Africa in Johannesburg last weekend saw them concede 439 runs and take just 2 wickets. However, the team hopes to recover some of their past glories in the upcoming Cricket World Cup.
When it comes to World Cups, you know, once we get to the knockout stages, we always tend to move on. So we're looking to do that first, and hopefully we could do something special, because the West Indian people need us to do something special.
And to finish on a cultural note, Venezuela's cinema is celebrating its 118th birthday. Cinema in Venezuela has enjoyed a boom in recent years. During 2013, more than 13 premieres were screened in cinemas, and in 2014, the figures almost doubled. Some of the recent hits have included El Libertador, Pelo Malo, and La Distancia Más Larga. More on these and other stories on our website, telesortv.net/English. For Telesor English, I'm Sarah Bagan. Have a good night.